All right, we're live. Welcome back to the After Action Project. The views and opinions expressed in this podcast are those of the individual co-hosts and do not reflect the official policy or position of the Firearms Radio Network and or their employers. Viewer discretion is advised. This is especially true on live shows. And this episode is unofficially brought to you by officially brought to you by JC Arms and Ammunition. Check those guys out. Their ammo shoots cleaner than any other ammunition that any of us have shot. That holds true for, flatter than any ammunition that we've shot as well. Tonight we're going to be talking about the precision long range course that Aaron and Melissa took and that Paul teaches. Before we get into that, Judson, tell us what you've been up to, man.
So I've been traveling for the last several weeks. I was 12 days celebrating my in-laws' 50th wedding anniversary. So that was kind of sort of a little vacation for me, and spent 5 or 6 of those days on the lake, just doing some fishing and watching the kids get towed behind the boat and everything. I literally did laundry at my in-laws' house when we came back, packed my suitcase, flew back to Durango, Colorado, and the next day took that same suitcase, never unpacked it, and jumped on a plane and flew down to Chattanooga, Tennessee, where I've been for the last week or so. And I've got a total of 7 classes down here, and one of them was our emergency response training, which is we did 3 days of that, and then I've got a basic instructor level class that I taught over the weekend, and then I did chief range safety officer today, and then I've got 2 more classes this coming up weekend. Luckily, though, I've got a couple of days off, and I'm about an hour north of where I was born and raised, so I'm going to take one of Tim's cars and go down and visit my family and take a couple of days off there. So that's kind of what I've been up to, and then looking forward to coming down to Albuquerque when I get home. I'm home for a week, and I'm coming down there and hanging out with you guys.
Yeah, we're looking forward to that as well. Andy, what about you, man? What have you been up to, and what do you have coming up?
Let's see. The only thing I've been up to since the last time we were on is you and I and our other instructor, Scott, went out and shot some action pistol at our local club. That was a lot of fun. I didn't do so great as I wanted to, but that's all right. That's part of learning. And other than that, just regular work stuff, and that's about it. Are we there? You're muted.
I'm always muted. I'm sorry. Melissa, tell us a little bit about yourself and what got you into long range shooting.
Range would bring rifles out for me to shoot.
Hey, Melissa.
Yes.
Can we start that over? So we couldn't hear the first half of what you said.
Sure. I would go out to the range and go shooting to get my LTC, and the guys at the range would bring rifles out for me to shoot. And so I kind of got more into rifles, which I took a couple of classes and started shooting long range.
Awesome. Aaron, what about you, man? What got you into long range shooting? How long have you been shooting? And why did you take this precision long range course?
I've been shooting since I was young. Grew up in the Midwest, so there's a lot of varmints, groundhog primarily. And I always was really intrigued with the long range stuff. Basically shot 17 rounds and 22 50, clear up until I was in my 20s, and then eventually wanted to reach out and go farther, a little more accurately, instead of just kind of guessing. And so I went with a 308, just standard, and kept kind of going from there. And really like the fact that every day is you fail and you have to learn more. And just like that constant drive to keep doing better and not necessarily shoot farther, but I want to shoot farther, but I want to shoot more accurately at the distances I do shoot. So kind of a passion of mine.
Awesome. And for our listeners, Paul, tell us a little bit about yourself, and then go into as much detail about or actually give us a brief introduction into the precision long range course.
Okay. I've been a firearms instructor for about 10 years. I started out teaching pistol and carbine. I was a really big into pistol competitions. I used to run pistol competitions in Dallas. I ended up owning a gun range east of Dallas and had room to build a long range facility, so I built that. And from there, even prior to that, I had already started shooting long range and was kind of one of the founding members of the Precision Rifle Series. And so I've been shooting in professional level competitions for about 7 years. And just kind of got into long range shooting. And once I got into that, I kind of consumed everything I did. And so I started teaching long range courses out at my range. And, it was the most rewarding instruction I've done because people accomplish things that they never thought imaginable. Even in an 8-hour class, we get people out to 1,000 yards. So it's a very rewarding way to make a living. And then because I owned a long range facility and I had a background in machining, I started building custom rifles there on the range. And so now that's what I do. I build custom rifles and I teach long range shooting and I compete professionally. That is all I do, pretty much year round. So,
what's your personal best or your personal record?
Record for what?
Long distance. And if there's different categories within there, feel free to educate me through my ignorance.
I have hit the 2280 out at the ranch. For me, it's not really about distance; it's about consistency. I'd rather hit the 1 mile target 4 out of 5 times than I would a 2,000 yard target, once out of 6 times. The big thing with the guys I run around with is if you can't do it 70% of the time, you're not doing it. So the idea of just slinging bullets at something until you finally hit it after 40 shots is not really much of an accomplishment in my world. So, the rifles I build and the things I try to do is really about consistency. As far as the best shot I've ever made, a few years ago in Oklahoma in the spring, it was 30 degrees. The wind was blowing almost 50 miles an hour. And I hit a 1,300 yard target 3 out of 5 times with a trigger that had failed. And I was having to lift the bolt slightly to get the gun to go off. And a buddy of mine told me that was the best shooting I would ever do. And he was correct. I've never done anything quite that good. That took a lot to get that off that day. But, yeah, it's just it's like Aaron said. Long range shooting is for type A people. It's never ending. It's like golf. You're never going to master it. There's always more to learn. I do this every day, and I've been doing it every day for almost 10 years, and I still learn something every day. So that's what draws people to it, and it draws a really high quality people. If you look at the people that I shoot with, if you look at the people that come to the classes, they're generally all people who've been fairly successful. And they finally found something that really challenges them. And so everybody typically gets along because we're typically all kind of the same personality type.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's something you mentioned already. I'm not a long range shooting guy yet because we were talking about this during the pre-show because what hobby in shooting's cheap, right? And I know long range can get pretty pricey. But something you mentioned that kind of reminded me back. We had Ryan Kleckner on the show, and he wrote the book, The Long Range Handbook. I ruined that. Long Range Shooting Handbook. And he mentioned exactly that about, the guys that'll show on Instagram, Instagram famous, that they'll show, look at my shots out to 1,000 yards or whatever. And, it's one shot out of 20. So I think I like the idea of, like you said, it's golf, that you're spending more time to actually be precision and you're doing it often more than just getting it done once and walking away.
Yeah, I'm in the process of building a 375 shot attack that I'm going to try to set some unofficial world records with, and we're going to do that at a mile and on out all the way to 3,000 yards. And they're going to be records for 3 consecutive shots for the group size, and then once we've got all of them with 3 shots, we're going to go back and do all of them with 5 shots. And, I want to prove that my rifles will shoot accurately at 3,000 yards 5 times in a row, not just once out of 47 shots. So we're working on that now, and we're gonna be able to do that at the September course, and we're gonna start down that road of trying to set some unofficial world records.
So why unofficial? Why don't we just get this out there?
There's no such thing as an official world record for that.
Yeah, let's get Guinness involved and make that happen then.
Right.
Yeah, So all you can do is just have a lot of witnesses, videotape it, and say, here we did it. So
That's cool. Melissa, talk to us a little bit about what distance have you shot out to, and what you took with you to this class. What was your equipment like? What gun were you shooting? What ammo were you shooting? Go into as much detail as you'd like.
When I went out to this class, I took a 6.5 Creedmoor and Masterpiece arms, and I was shooting Vortex scope laser, and I used quantity 140 grain ammo. And the furthest I got out to was at 1 mile, which I was pretty excited about.
Yeah, I'd be excited reaching out to a mile. Aaron, what about you? What gun were you shooting?
Paul McCoy Special. It was 7-300, which is a 300 Win Mag, neck down to 7mm. Paul built it off the Stiller 300 action, and I shoot 195 grain burrs. It was get the 2280 as well. So yeah,
that's awesome.
Yeah, what he's not
Paul,
telling you is he stacked two shots. He stacked two shots 8 inches apart.
Is there a recommended caliber that you would say this is the go-to, or is it more or less, and again, I'm not a long range shooter. I mean, my world is, 20 yards and under. So, I mean, I'm a pistol guy, pistol instructor, all that. So, forgive my ignorance if you're like, dude, there's so many different, but do you have a recommended caliber that you would say, if you really, really, really want to reach out and touch something, I would go with this.
Oops.
I base it on the distance you're trying to shoot. Okay.
Paul, you might be muted. I clicked the mute thing there for a second, so you might be on mute.
Okay. It depends on the distance you're trying to shoot.
Now. Okay.
I think.
So depending on how far you're trying to shoot.
No, we didn't lose Paul. He's on here.
There he is.
You got me?
we got the share, Paul.
Do what?
Hey,
yeah. Try the. There should be a little microphone button there. I can't unmute it.
He's on mobile.
Yeah.
I can hear Paul when he talks.
You can? Okay.
Yeah.
I can't.
I can't either. Uh-oh.
Paul, can you say something? Or if you're not saying something, I'm assuming you are.
All right. Have you guys got? Hello?
What did I do?
I can hear you, Paul.
Weird.
Well.
So, Aaron, you shoot. You said 3. What did you say you shot?
I shoot a 7-300, which is a 300 Win Mag that's been necked down to 7mm.
Gotcha. And then Melissa's.
At the class, there was probably 4, maybe 5 of those, and Melissa brought a 6.5 Creedmoor, made by MPA or Masterpiece Arms.
That 6.5 Creedmoor is getting popular now, isn't it? It's kind of the second go-to long-range round or something like that. Is something I read. Is that right?
Yeah, I was at and when I say I'm a pistol guy, that's my training regiment. But I mean, I'm a rifle guy too. I'm just not a long-range rifle guy. And a couple of 3 or 4 weeks ago or so, I had a chance to go to the range with Mark Menon, one of the We Like Shooting Patreons, and he brought his 6.5, and it was the first time I'd ever shot one. And it was a bolt action long range setup. And we were only shooting out to 100 yards, but that was a nice rifle to shoot. I love that caliber.
Yeah, we got Paul back now.
Okay.
Sorry.
All right.
So we were asking, what equipment does somebody need to bring out? And then Judson wanted to know, what's the preferred round for long distance shooting?
Well, what I ask people is, how far are you going to try to shoot? A lot of people will call me and want a rifle that'll shoot 2,000 yards. And then you talk to them more and more, and you find out they don't really have any place to shoot 2,000 yards. And so it becomes inherently more expensive as you try to shoot further and further. A 6.5 Creedmoor will, Melissa was hammering the 1 mile target. That 6.5 Creedmoor will shoot a mile consistently. So for most people, that's plenty of rifle. There are guys killing elk with 6.5 Creedmoor at 700-800 yards. Whether you think that's right, wrong, or indifferent, there's guys doing it all the time. And so if you want to go beyond about 1,200 yards consistently, I would go to a 7.300 or a 300 Norma. I'm not a big fan of the 338 Lapua anymore, even though I enjoy building them. But a 7.300 will do everything a 338 Lapua will do, and it does it a lot cheaper and with a lot less recoil. And if you need to go past 2,300 yards, which is kind of the effective limit of a 7.300, then you need to go to a 375 Shy-Tac or the new 33XC, which is what David Tubb is in the process of coming out with. And it's a 338 Lapua with 20 grains more capacity, and it's something that I've been talking to David Tubb about, and I'm going to be one of the first guys to build one. And so really that's it. If 1,200 and in, shoot a 6.5 Creedmoor. If you want to 1,200 to 2,200, 7.300 or a 300 Norma. And if you want to go past 2,300, you need to get a 375 Shy-Tac. So,
if I wanted to take your class, what equipment do I need to bring out with me?
You're going to need either a bolt action or a gas powered rifle. The gas guns typically run out of juice about 750 yards, so you're really not going to be able to get to 1,000 yards in a lot of cases with a gas gun, even a 6.5 Creedmoor gas gun. You're going to need a bolt action rifle and 6.5 Creedmoor 308, 300 Win Mag that will shoot 1 MOA or better. So 1 inch at 100 yards is kind of the minimum for a precision rifle one course, where we're only going to go to 1,000 yards. And then you're going to need a bipod, and you're going to need some type of rear bag, and you're going to need some type of ballistic app on your phone or a Kestrel that's got applied ballistics on it or something. And you're going to need about 200 rounds of ammo, and that's a good scope. You're going to need a scope that's got at least 20 power magnification, preferably one that will track and repeat and is not going to cause you problems. We could do an entire show on scopes and all of the things that are involved in the various scopes and the good and the bad of them. But you generally get what you pay for. If you go buy a $400 scope, it's not going to hold up to a weekend of shooting. So.
You were using a Vortex scope on there. Why Vortex? Why'd you choose that scope?
Are you talking to me?
Yes.
Oh.
Sorry.
Someone suggested it to me, so that's what I used.
Awesome.
I've only been shooting for about a year, so fairly new.
Wait, you've only been shooting for a year and you've reached out to how far?
A mile.
I hate you.
Yeah, we've heard nothing but good things about Vortex. Aaron, what's your optic? What optic do you use or scope do you use?
I shoot IOR, Valdata, Patriot, and I have a Recon as well.
And I guess this is a question for everybody. If it was, you had a buddy that was wanting to get into long range shooting, what gun would you recommend they pick up? They had all said and done, they had $3,000. With $3,000, is that a reasonable estimate to get into long range shooting out to 1,200 yards?
We're talking about $3,000 for the scope and the gun.
Yeah, or is that so? What should somebody look to budget if they want to get into long range shooting seriously? They wanted to do, they wanted to go on. How much?
You'll need more than $3,000.
All right. Where should somebody start budget? So if I wanted to start, say I wanted to get in a long range shooter in 6 months, where should I set my budget at?
I'd say closer to $5,000.
5. What about you, Aaron? Say, is that where you put it at?
Probably a little less than that, quite a bit. I mean, you can get into long range. We're talking most people can shoot up to 1,000 yards, so you can probably get yourself a Savage and break on it, spend $800-900 on a scope, and see if you even like doing it or not. And I'd probably go with just a 6.5, since you can get Hornet ELDMs and X's basically across the shelf. So you could get into it. I kind of recommend to people, if you're going to get into it, let's just get you a Savage and put a break on it. And then if you like it and it's addicting, then you can sell that gun and actually get serious about calling Paul and building yourself something that's going to reach out and touch whatever you want to get to. It isn't for everybody. You got to have the passion to learn it. You can't just plug into an app and all goes well. And so I kind of recommend people just to touch the waters, taste it a little bit. Let's see if we can get you out to 800, 900, maybe 1,000 yards. And then after that, if you really got the bug, then you can probably look at getting something a little more.
I say, I guess you could do like Aaron and start out with a 308 route.
Yeah, I started with a stock 308, stupid 20-inch barrel. It belted me all the time. It was all over the place. I couldn't hit 500 yards from anything. But then, as I learned more, I just kept going and kept pushing it, and eventually sent it out to another gunsmith. Before I knew Paul, I'd send everything to Paul now. Just a plug there. But I got it built to a custom status, and then was able to do 1,100, 1,200 with it. And I probably only had 1,500 in the gun. It was all said and done. I had, a lot more in ammo, but that was my problem for not learning what I was doing earlier. But
yeah, so when you talk about a long range, of course, I'm a hunter, and that's probably about the long range that I do. So would this kind of course benefit hunters as well, to get them out there to where they're comfortable in shooting longer distances and elk and deer and stuff like that too? It almost seems like a stupid question, but what you guys do, I think, is just slightly different. Am I right?
Well, it's the fundamental that you really have to really get down. When you're shooting at long distance, a mile, 1,500, just fractions of movement, even in the trigger, can just totally blow your day. And, forget the wind, you can just totally blow your day by not being accurate. So it teaches you to relax and to really be precise. Our barrels heat up quite rapidly when you shoot, excessive rounds. You're taught to make every shot count and be patient and learn what you're doing before you shoot. At least that's how I come at it. So as a hunter, you only have one shot usually before the animal runs away anyway. So whether you're shooting 1,500 or 100, it's the same fundamentals, and it can just teach you a lot about how to just do it more patiently. That's my opinion. So I think it's great for hunters.
I have a question for Paul, or the panel themselves. Zach, one of our listeners, he said Ruger Precision. What are you guys? Where are you guys leaning on that?
The Ruger Precision rifles all shoot fairly accurately. Some of them will shoot, 3/8 of a minute. As far as accuracy, there's nothing wrong with them. The back part of that stock/chassis is absolutely a piece of crap. It's rattly. It comes loose. It's not very stable. If I was going to tell somebody to go buy an entry-level 6.5 Creedmoor, I would tell them to buy a Savage. But it's not a horrible rifle. It's just they were so close to having a really phenomenal deal if they had just done a little better job on the buttstock portion of that deal, because they all shoot pretty good. So I wouldn't tell you not to buy one, but don't go buy an RPR for $1,200 and think you're getting a $3,000 rifle, or $4,000 or $5,000. You're not. And don't. If I could give people one bit of advice, and it kind of goes back to what Aaron said a while ago. I don't mind you going and buying a $1,200, $1,000 rifle. See if you like long range shooting. But if you do and you decide to stay with it, don't start putting money into your Savage or your RPR or all that, because you're never going to turn that into a $5,000 rifle. It doesn't matter how much money you spend. And unfortunately, there are a lot of people who will sell you all kinds of crap trying to convince you that you're going to build that into something really cool. And it's not ever going to be more than it is. It's just got to do with tolerance stacking and the machine work that's done in it and the way the throat's cut. So when you get ready to move up. Get a rifle from me or George Gardner or, Surgeon or somebody. Get a good rifle. Don't start pouring money into a Savage or an RPR or something. And if you're going to spend $3,000 on a rifle and a scope, spend $2,000 of that on the scope, because the scopes cause people so many problems that they don't realize they're having. Every day they go to the range, their dope seems like it's changing. Every day they go to the range, it seems like their zero's moved. And really none of that has happened. It's just the scope won't hold zero, and the scope isn't repeatable. And so you're just constantly fighting your equipment. And we had a class recently, and I'm not saying this, but two of the guys, I'll just say two of the guys had really good rifles. The other two guys did not. And at the end of 3 days, the two guys who had really good rifles had not only learned a lot more, they had had a much better time and much more enjoyable weekend than the two guys who fought their equipment and their scopes and all this all weekend. So it just takes the fun out of long range shooting when all you do is try to figure out what's wrong today. And if you've got decent equipment, you don't have to do that. You're never going to learn anything. When you miss a shot, it should be more wind or less wind. If you're missing shots and you don't know whether it's you, the rifle, the ammo, the scope, then the information you're getting back from where the bullet impacts is not teaching you anything.
Right.
Because you don't know what caused it. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And I totally agree with you on so many fronts there. All of them, except for the ones that, I'm not familiar with as far as your terminology. But I do have a follow-up question on that. You mentioned scopes a lot in that answer. And I mean, as far as scopes go and optics, I mean, are we talking like, what type of brands are you looking to see that come on your range? Like, that's that guy's got it. Are we talking all the way up to like Smith and Bender, or what like Leopold? What type of optics do you recommend?
I in all fairness and all clarification, I work for IOR Valdata. I do all their research and development. I design some of their scopes. However, there are a lot of good scopes on the market. Some of the Bushnell HDMR scopes are good. George Gardner at GA Precision has been involved in designing some of those. Steiner makes a very good scope. Schmidt-Bender makes a very good scope. Collis is making a very good scope. Night Force has got a couple of really good models now. The thing you need to remember is almost all of those scopes come out of the same plant in Japan. There's only one or two companies in Japan that make scopes. So if it's not made in Germany, where Schmidt's made in Steiner and, IOR's made in Romania, Night Force, Vortex, Leopold, all that stuff comes out of the same place. And it's just different levels of quality. And so a scope on its best day, regardless of whose name is on it, is a fairly delicate piece of equipment. And so I have seen every brand of scope made, including Schmidt-Bender, fail, and I've seen more than one fail. The only scopes I've ever seen fail at a level that I thought was horrifically unacceptable was the original run of the Vortex Viper PSTs. I had probably 50 students with Vortex Viper PSTs, and every single one of them, the scope failed, and many of them failed multiple times and had to be returned multiple times. The Razor line of Vortex stuff is really good. They hold up well. Lots of guys winning matches with them. And I think the new Viper PST stuff, the reason there's a Gen 2 PST is because they had so many problems with the Gen 1. And so I think the Gen 2 stuff is probably a bit better. Other than that, I've not seen a particular brand of scope have an above average number of problems, but they all will have failures. So if you get to the range and nothing's making sense, the first thing you need to do is make sure nothing's come loose, because we see that a lot. Action bolts, scope rings. Beyond that, the first thing you need to do is go back to zero. If you've got subtensions in your scope, use those subtensions to hold over and see if the scope tracks without you spinning the knobs. And a lot of times you can determine really quickly that, hey, as long as I don't touch the knob, everything kind of stays where it should. So there's ways to figure out pretty quickly if your scope is the problem. But, don't think because you spend $3,000 on a scope it can't fail, because it happens all the time.
Yeah, that's kind of that was kind of the answer I was looking for, or assuming that I would get. So when you say a scope fails, can you just give us in some bullet points, and then I'll turn it back over to Jeremy, because in my world, a failure is on a pistol short range, AR-15 short range, everything, like I said, in my world is under 100 yards on an AR, under 25 on a pistol. So when you say a scope fails, what does that mean in layman's terms in our world?
Well, there are a number of different types of failures. The most common type of failure is a failure to track or a failure to return to zero. So one of the first things we'll do is we'll have the guys go to 100 yards, and then we'll have them run their knobs up 5 mils or 10 MOA and shoot a few shots, and then we'll have them run them back down to 0 after we've established and obtained a good 0. So we just want to make sure that the scope will come back to 0. You would be shocked at how many scopes will not come back to 0. There's a thing called a box test where you go up 5 mils, over 5 mils, down 5 mils, and back 5 mils. So you should end up right back where you started. A lot of scopes halfway through that just quit tracking. They just refuse to follow the tube in there rides on springs, and sometimes it just gets hung up and it just won't come back. So another type of failure is that you'll lose the nitrogen charge in the scope and the scope will fog up. Another type is that the parallax, every time you fire a shot, the parallax will go out so that you've got it in focus. You fire a shot, it goes out of focus. You refocus it, fire another shot, it goes out of focus. Just a lot of things like that where you do the same thing repeatedly, but the bullet doesn't do the same thing repeatedly. When you start seeing that, and you're pretty sure it's not you, and you're pretty sure it's not the ammo, then you need to start, like I said, the easiest way is to take the thing back to 0, re-verify your 100-yard 0. If you've got subtensions in your scope, then either go out at distance to, a distance like, for me, 500 yards is 2.5 mils. So I can run out, I can hold 2.5 mils. If I hit the target holding 2.5 mils, but then I dial 2.5 mils and I'm high, then I know my scope is not tracking, because when I use the reticle, it does exactly what I tell it. But if I dial 2.5 mils, then it's shooting high. So I know that I've lost track. So that's just a simple test that you can do to start trying to figure out what's going on.
Gotcha.
But the biggest issue we see is loose scope rings and loose scopes. Number one, bar none, guys don't tighten their stuff up enough. I do not recommend Loctite because there is too good of a chance you may get to the range and need to move something. If you use a quality set of scope rings and a quality base and you torque those to the torque spec that was recommended, you should not have to use Loctite.
Okay.
What is the Melissa? What would you say the biggest challenge for you was reaching out to? You said you reached out to a model.
Yes.
What was the biggest challenge getting out to that distance consistently?
Probably just judging the wind and mirage.
And so how does that, what's the process for you going through there, judging the wind and the mirage?
Well, hopefully you see where your first shot hits, so you kind of know how many mils to hold over or move to the left or right. So it just kind of goes back and forth on the wind can go. I mean, that day it was going from left to right, so it was basically moving all over the place. So we were constantly trying to readjust.
Makes sense. What about you, Aaron? What were some of the challenges that you faced reaching out to your furthest distance?
Paul yelling in my ear. No. No, probably for me, at first, it was just, I've said this before in some other instances, it's just mental. I can actually psych myself out and lose my fundamentals. And so that's actually something that I've had to spend more time on than my gun. My gun's better than I am most days. So that was probably the biggest thing, just relaxing and calming down and, just remembering all of the muscle memory and all of the dry firing I do and things that I've been taught. So, just mental, getting out of my own head and relaxing and just letting my fundamentals take over.
Paul, for some of your students, what are some of the challenges, the more common challenges that you're seeing in class for students?
It depends somewhat on the student's experience. If a student has spent a long time shooting, they tend to suffer a little bit with trying to learn new things. I'm not going to say that the way I shoot is the best way to shoot. What I'm going to tell you is if you go to a Precision Rifle Series match and you watch the best long-range tactical shooters in the world, they're all going to shoot a rifle just like I do. We all have certain things that we do different, but the basis of it is that over a day's time, you're going to fatigue. In theory, no matter what I do to the rifle when I'm shooting it, if I can do it the same every time, I should get the same results downrange every time. If I want to squeeze the grip with 20 pounds of pressure and pull the thing into my shoulder with 20 pounds of pressure, I can do that over and over again, and the rifle will do the same thing. The problem is you can't do that for more than about 5 minutes. So the first problem we have is people are not comfortable. They don't take time and they don't have the knowledge to know how to set their rifle up. Their scope is too high, or their cheek comb is too low, or their length of pull is not correct. And so you can watch them trying to shoot, and you can literally see the muscles in their neck straining. You should be able to get in a prone position behind a rifle and set your cheek on the cheek comb and lay there for hours and be comfortable. And very few people really know how to do that and know how to set the rifle up. So, I tell people that the first couple of hours of class are going to drag, because we're going to spend a lot of time getting people's rifles and equipment set up correctly for them. Because if we don't do that, they're not going to make it 2 hours, and their neck's going to be cramping up, and they're going to be miserable. And so once we get the rifle set up for them, that's really a huge, every one of them just says, wow, I can't believe how much easier it is to shoot. And then we start working on the fundamentals, and I show them, not only show them how I do it, but I show them why. I explain the physics behind why I teach what I teach, and why all of the guys in the PRS that consistently finish in the top 50, we all shoot the same way. And it's kind of a minimalist theory, where if you lock a gun down in a vise and you reach up and pull the trigger with a piece of wire, that's the most accurate that rifle's ever going to be. As soon as we start touching it, that's where the problem comes in with accuracy. So the less of you can put into shooting the rifle, the less fatigue you're going to have and the more consistent you're going to be. So I teach a very hands-off kind of a way to shoot. And again, it's the way all of the top guys in the country shoot. And it really just allows the rifle to fulfill its part of the job. It keeps you from handicapping the rifle, basically. And we all get stressed and we all get tired, and I still slap the trigger occasionally, and I still find myself gripping the rifle too much, especially when I'm starting to get tired at the end of a match. But day in and day out, getting the rifle set up correctly, and then getting the student to understand the correct way to manage his system, his weapon system. Once you get those two things solved and you get the fundamentals squared away, one of you guys was talking about being a pistol instructor. I used to teach pistol, and once you got somebody's fundamentals squared away, it didn't matter what you asked them to do, they could do it, because they had good, solid fundamentals. And it's the same way in long-range rifle. Once we get their fundamentals squared away, then shooting a mile is just spinning the turret and adjusting for the wind. So that's the big challenge. Is we spend a lot of time at 100 yards getting people consistent, showing them how to build positions, and teaching them how to get behind the rifle the same every time. And that's the whole deal, is with long-range shooting, is to get the shooter to do the same thing every time, to get the scope to do the same thing every time, to get the ammunition to do the same thing every time. And once you get all those things handled, long-range shooting isn't really that tough. Then all you've got is the wind. And that's the ultimate goal, is if I miss a shot, more wind or less wind. It wasn't me, it wasn't the rifle, it wasn't the ammo, and it wasn't the scope. That is the goal of long-range shooting. It's that simple.
Yeah, that's really good stuff there. It's funny, I think every single podcast that we do, that word comes up, fundamentals. And regardless of what it is, shooting-wise, even we've had some Krav Maga instructors on, and it goes back to those fundamentals. And we try to hammer those into our brain and our muscle memory to make sure that we stick to those fundamentals. And then towards the end of the day, those old habits start coming back, and we have to kind of go back into fundamentals again. So let me ask you, Paul, as far as your course, do you have any classroom material that you do, or is this strictly all out on the range?
I've got some tutorials that I'm going to email the students prior to the class that covers a lot of the bookwork portion of it. Now, we're going to sit down at the beginning of the class for about 2 hours, and I'm going to go through, mils and minutes of angle, and I'm going to go through wind, and I'm going to go through mirage, and I'm going to explain to them the importance of 100-yard zero. I'm going to explain to them wind strategy and wind theory, and the realities of, one of the things I tell the students is, the last class, we were sitting at a kitchen table in a lodge, and I said, guys, tell me what the wind's doing 2,000 yards on the other side of the canyon. And they all look at you like you're crazy, but that's what a lot of people want you to believe. They want you to believe that by some magic miracle, they know what's going on 2,000 yards away with the wind. and nobody does. So I go through the steps of how to make an educated guess and then how to make a correction. And we go through all of that in the classroom, but it's after that first 2 hours, we might spend 30 minutes in the morning just going over the day's game plan, talking about what worked yesterday, who struggled with what. I always am interested to know what the students feel like they need more work on. And we try to make it very personalized so that every person gets what they need to get out of the course. Everybody shows up with different experience levels and different ability levels, but in the end, we want every single person to push themselves beyond what they thought they were capable of doing, regardless of where they started. So that's kind of the big picture goal. For me, it's not about how far they shoot. If I can get a guy to a 1,000-yard target and he can stack shots, he can shoot a quarter-minute group at 1,000 yards. That's as good as it gets. After that, it's just distance and wind. So, that's the goal, is to get the shooter proficient and to teach them how to solve their own problems. Because every day you go to the range, long-range shooting is going to present you with problems. And I don't want them to leave this class and have been successful for 3 days with me standing there calling the wind for them, and then they get to the range by themselves and they don't have any idea what to do. So I very much make the students, I start out helping them, but very quickly we start making the students walk on their own, and we start making them help each other. And that's so that they become self-sufficient on the road.
Yeah, that's awesome there too. So I have a question for the students, Melissa and Aaron. How did it work for you? We'll start with Melissa. How did it start for you? Did you start out at the 100 yards? Did you find that easy and then you just worked your way out pretty simply, or did it take a while to do that through Paul's instruction, or how did that work for you? Same question for Aaron.
Are you talking about like when I first started shooting long range?
Right. Yeah. From starting, just getting out there, and the first time you get behind a nice scope and a really sweet gun, and up to where you're at now, to where Melissa's shooting out to a mile.
Yeah, typically in the class they had us always start out at 100 yards just to zero in. So, but the very first time I did it wasn't with Paul. So we started out at 300 yards. And now it's like when you get up to 500, it doesn't seem so hard, which is kind of weird. And 100 doesn't seem like anything. So, yeah, it's just I don't know. It's just kind of a different way of shooting and looking at things. I don't know.
Gotcha. Aaron?
I started, we live on a pretty large farm, and so I started putting my own steel out every 100 and all the way out to 1,000. So I was shooting somewhat inconsistency with a 308, and then through a lot of Paul's practical knowledge, he used a lot of practical knowledge. Stuff that I was struggling with was a lot of the wind, and I really was having a hard time with my wind day. And basically the low impact type of shooting that he does, a lot of that he began to it clicked for me. I'd been shooting quite a while and having some basic idea that I was shooting okay, using a mid-range scope and a custom 308. But then some of the practical stuff that he was talking about was more important really than anything else. And so then it just started to click for me. So I was already kind of shooting there, and then I started to get very consistent out easily at 800. And then took the class with him, and again, it was by that point him just pushing. And I was part of wanting to be a part of the challenge and see how far I could go consistently. And that's what I really enjoy, is being able to hit the targets consistently over and over. I mean, I went for the long ranges and tried to hit, the steel once, but it's really satisfying when you can do it back to back at long ranges.
You're muted again, Jeremy.
I'm always muted. Always muted. I know I'm the worst. Aaron, who is this class for, man? Who should take this class?
I'd say anybody with an interest in learning. Don't go there with kind of being the guy at the range, I kind of call it, where he's just the loud guy, always talks really loud all the time, and you hear him telling about all the great things he's done with his gun. That guy might just stay home. But if you want to go and you want to learn how to really do it and actually get it done practically and do it without spending tens of thousands of dollars wasting your time, That's who I would recommend going. And even people that want to get a feel for it, you're not going to have a bad time, and you're going to get on the steel. Paul, make sure, I think if you listen to him, I don't think anybody would have a problem minus total equipment failure, but you might as well borrow somebody else's gun. The community of long range shooters, the more I get into it, and Paul said this too, but you meet these guys and people are really helpful because we tend to have to be humble because we fail a lot, because it's hard to read the wind at 1,500 yards or whatever. So they're going to help, and you're going to get on the steel, and it's going to be a good time, I think, for most people.
That's awesome. And Melissa, the same question over you, man. Who's this student for? Who should take this class?
Kind of like what he said. Anybody that's interested in long range would definitely want to come take Paul's class. He's very, very experienced and knowledgeable on all of it. And like he was saying, also, it's everybody's very encouraging. Whenever somebody else hits the target, everybody is like cheering for you. Like it's just a good community of people.
That's awesome. Paul, what's been your biggest takeaway since you've started teaching others how to shoot out to, extreme long distances?
I think over the years I've gotten better at anticipating the problems. The last class I taught, I looked at a couple of the students' equipment and I just told them, look, I'm not even going to waste your time. Go take that scope off, go take that scope mount off. That's not ever going to hold zero. I mean, it would look like a $25 scope mount and a $200 scope. And, we got them fixed up. We always bring extra rifles. We always bring extra scopes. And I don't think I've maybe ever had but one long range class where somebody didn't end up shooting one of my rifles or, Val's or whoever's there, but they're going to end up borrowing a rifle. And we'd much rather do that because if you're having rifle problems, you're not going to learn anything. I spent my first 2 years in the Precision Rifle Series with a rifle that just had a manufacturing defect in it. And it took me 2 years to figure out what was wrong with it. And I didn't learn anything for 2 years because I never knew why I missed a shot. And I can't emphasize that enough. All we're doing is firing a shot, and every shot that we fire down range becomes a data point. And we then use that data point to make a more educated guess on the next shot. And the only way that works is if that bullet did what you told it to do, with the exception of the wind. And so really over the years, I've gotten a little better at keeping people from having problems before they have them and or recognizing immediately, what they're doing. I'll be honest with you. It took me a really long time to get good at long range shooting. It took me 4.5 or 5 years to get a top 10 finish in the PRS. And in hindsight, that was a lot of work, but I've also had every problem any student's ever going to have. I just have. And so if a student's struggling, I can almost immediately, I know what he's doing because I've already done it. And so that helps a lot in the fact that I didn't get good at this overnight. And so whatever problem you're going to have, don't worry about it. We've all had it. I liken it very much to martial arts. You don't meet too many martial arts instructors that are too terribly cocky because at some point they were a white belt that got the crap beat out of them every day. And this is the same way. We all started out on the range having no clue what we were doing, with the wind killing us, the rifle killing us, the ammo killing us. And so when you're struggling, nobody wants to see you continue to struggle. We're all going to try to help you because we've all been there. And that's really what I base my teaching on, is just, hey, I've been there. Don't worry about it. Let me show you what you need to do. And, if I have to hand them a new rifle to get them to actually get something out of the course, then that's what I do. It just, if they're going to take the time and spend the money and the effort to come to a class, we're going to make sure that they leave that class having learned everything they can learn. So.
Awesome. So I have a question for Aaron really quick, and then I'll kick it back over to Jeremy. So Aaron, in all of my pistol level classes, we talk about trigger finger placement as far as like where you put your finger on the trigger for, double action versus single action, whatnot. In your experience, where is your trigger finger on that trigger when you're shooting long range?
Well, I shoot with my toes. Actually, it's exact. I use the very pad tip of my toe, same as I would teach somebody with their finger. One of the things that I've noticed when people shoot is they tend to basically embrace the trigger like it's their girlfriend or boyfriend. And I tell them to let up on that trigger and just barely, as I've heard many people say, sneak up on the gun, and that's what I do.
That's awesome.
That is awesome.
In Judson's case, it's how he grips his boyfriend. I think Sean was watching.
My wife is watching, by the way.
Sure, my wife is watching. So, Aaron, talk to us a little bit about some of the challenges that you face, if there are any challenges that you face. Andy had mentioned that you also shoot USPSA, and for those listeners out there that are kind of on the fence about whether or not they should get into this, what advice do you have for them?
Absolutely, don't let can't be your problem. Don't ever say you can't do it. I kind of live by the motto of I'm here to do what they say can't be done. So for me, it was just kind of my personality. And somebody says, well, you can't shoot or you can't drive a car or whatever it might be. I'm like, well, I guess you'll see me do that as I drive by. But with the long range precision, it became something that I actually found a great passion in because it's a challenge to me to shoot. At first, my first goal, I had a list of things to do before I die. I wanted to shoot 1,000 yards. I wanted to shoot a 3-shot group inside a 10-inch or basically a 1 MOA circle. And once I met that, then it was like, well, now I want to shoot a mile. And then after a mile, I want to shoot a mile consistently. So, it's basically how I did it. For me, the struggles have never been physical. I just seem to fit behind a gun really well. There's a lot of muscle memory there, I guess, because I just lay down behind one and I'm there. And but when I go into a match or something, or even when I was in the training, I have to get over the mental thought of there's 30 people waiting for me to shoot. I remember the first class I went to, one of the trainers, not Paul's, came up and he goes, "How do you shoot?" And I said, "Well, that's the question of the day." Everybody wants to watch me shoot. So it just kind of puts, a little mental pressure on me, and I'm getting better and better as I do it more and more, of that not being the issue. But I just tell everybody, don't let even handgun. I shoot handgun, I shoot ARs, I build ARs for a while. Just try it. And you'll find yourself able to do things that you didn't want to believe you could do. Not that you didn't think you could do, you just didn't want to believe you could do them. And go for it. And I highly recommend getting some training, not just because I've been through this and we're talking about, Paul's training, but that was a transition for me from literally, I have 5-gallon buckets full of brass, 308 brass that I probably could have gotten by with a quarter of that had I had just some basic training. And the same goes for handgun and AR and carbine, advanced carbines. If you love something, then get some training from some professionals that can kind of take you to that next level to stop wasting your time. And then you really find that passion come alive. So.
Well, you're an inspiration to all of us, man. I'm so happy to have been able to have the opportunity to sit here and talk with you and Melissa and Paul. It's been a really eye-opening kind of discussion.
Melissa,
Yes.
What advice do you have for those folks that might be interested in getting into long-range shooting?
I would definitely say training is key, even on handgun, anything. But just get out there and try it. It's not going to hurt anything. Just go out and have fun.
I like it.
Lots, Paul. We had a listener question. I'd like to pose it to you guys. Scott asks, what are your thoughts on surplus military rifles for long-range shooting?
My experience, there's different grades of surplus military rifles. I know a lot of people look at $150 Mosin or something and believe that, they can do that long range. My experience has been you've got to buy more than one often to find that one that's just a jewel. You can buy some M1s and still that from the CMP program, and some still shoot like dimes. You can buy a Mosin, it'll shoot a dime, just dimes out there, and then you buy one that won't even hold together. but I do think there's a lot of merit in buying one and getting into long range, but you aren't really, you're going to find some struggles there that we aren't necessarily going to find with a well machined. I mean, there's the technology now that has made machining where it is, has made quarter MOA guns, which we're talking quarter inch at 100, totally possible.
Muted.
Muted.
Thanks. Oh, man. Melissa, do you have any other thoughts on military surplus? And Paul said he'll be right back with us.
I don't know anything about military surplus.
Yeah. Okay, good. I'm not the only one. I got a Mosin, but I haven't shot out. I haven't done anything with it competitively or try to push it to its limits or not. What are you guys' thoughts on ammo? I mean, how much? What's when we're talking about ammo, rifle, scope? What's the most important thing, if there is a most important?
I definitely think it's important. I haven't learned how to reload yet. I've started buying the stuff to do it, but I haven't started doing it. But I know that's key when you get into long range. Aaron will probably be able to help you more on that.
Yeah. Aaron, do you reload your ammo?
I do. It's right there. See it?
Nice.
Right.
I got into reloading a couple years back, maybe 3 or 4, because I was having a lot of problems with. Turned out to be my knowledge. I knew nothing about twist rates. I knew about it, but I didn't understand how important how your gun was cut and the grains of your bullet and the O-gives on your bullet and thing and how that affected your accuracy. So once I got into that, then I was able to actually see consistent over each shot to shot was responding exactly the same. And with some of the factory ammo, I was finding inconsistencies and basically like bolting the gun down and still seeing inconsistencies, while I was able to kind of eliminate a lot of that with reloading. And then I started to reload the bullets that were from my guns, and I really started to see a significant increase in my accuracy. And as I said, the gun, the bullets, my ammunition is better than I am. So now I have to work on myself. And so that's nice to take that equation out of it. I'm no longer the guy going, oh, there's something wrong with my gun, or this ammo is junk. It's not. I probably need to adjust my skill level and practice more. So I highly recommend reloading. Again, that's another one of those things people are like, I can't do that. And you read all these Facebook posts and people are terrified. And, again, you can get some training or find somebody. And I enjoy reloading. I enjoy it very much. I don't reload, near as much as Paul does, but I reload quite a bit. And for my 7-300, I have to reload. You can't buy it over the counter.
Right.
I can tell you that I do every time use the exact same grain, like when I order it. So I haven't ever varied from that. Like, I guess different guns like certain types of ammo. So it seems to work.
Yeah, that makes sense. That way it's this, you dial in that's consistent. Paul, how important is it that shooters reload their long distance ammo?
Can anybody?
Awkward silence.
No, yeah, Paul, I can't hear you.
Okay, can you hear me?
Oh.
Yeah, we can hear you now.
Okay, I'm just having a hard time hearing you guys. What was the question?
How important is reloaded ammunition for long range shooter? How important is it that students reload their ammo or be able to? Or
Well, in the old days, it was very important because there were just not a lot of good ammunition, and the only stuff you could get was the, federal gold medal match 308 stuff. Now you've got a lot of companies that are making match grade ammunition, and so even in 6 Creedmoor, 6.5 Creedmoor, a number of other calibers, and so you don't have to reload your own ammo anymore to get into long range shooting. Something like the 7-300 that Aaron has and that Melissa's about to have. Those kind of cartridges you're going to have to reload. There's not going to be any ammo on the shelf for that, but you can certainly show up with a rifle and be competitive at a club match or a one-day match with ammo off the shelf and a rifle that you didn't spend $4,000 on. So,
can I use my 458 SOCOM?
You can try.
Yeah. All right. So sounds like for me it'd probably be a 6.5 Creedmoor or something.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'd be able to reach out past 1200 in the next. Oh shit. Well then, Aaron, don't let can't be your problem. Paul, what advice do you have for our listeners? Paul, did you hear or did you catch that, Paul?
I'm sorry, I got you guys now. What's going on?
No, just asking what advice do you have for our listeners that are interested in getting into long range shooting?
You know, I'm going to say this, and it's going to sound a little bit self-serving, but when I started shooting long range and I started shooting long range competitions, there was no training available. There was about 10 guys in the country who took turns winning the matches. And those guys knew things that nobody else knew. And it took me 6 years and well over $100,000 of going to matches to learn that stuff. And I told somebody the other day that when you come to one of my classes, I'm literally teaching you things that cost me $100,000 to learn, and that there was no one that would teach. When I first started, I mean, those guys, they hid that kind of information like it was, gold. And so get some training, whether you get it from me or get it from somewhere else. Guys will go and they'll lob, I like to say they'll lob $1.50 down range every 10 seconds, but they won't spend $500 to go spend a weekend with somebody that could help them increase their hit percentage by 80%. Go get some good training early, and it will save you 10 times what you spend on the training. Literally, I promise you. If nothing else, you're going to learn what equipment to buy. That's another thing is before you start buying equipment, go to a training class, talk to somebody that knows, and get some recommendations on equipment. I have customers all the time call me and tell me they've spent the last 6 months researching parts, and they know exactly what they want to use for their rifle build. And then I ask them what they're trying to accomplish, and the parts that they have spent 6 months researching are not applicable at all. So get with somebody that knows how to teach you to shoot and can give you some good recommendations on equipment so that you don't waste. I probably wasted $5,000 to $7,000 in equipment that either didn't work or didn't work well enough. So don't do that. And most of the guys in my generation, we all did that. And so we're really happy to help you guys not waste that money.
That makes sense. Where can people find more out about you, Paul?
My website, which is currently being rebuilt, but it is up. The new website will be up this week. Is pmacprecision.com. The easiest way to get hold of me is pmacprecision@gmail.com. I usually will get back to you within 24 hours. Please be patient. I get literally hundreds of emails a week and hundreds of text messages, and somewhere in all there, I still have to build a few rifles and shoot a few matches. So I will get back to you just as quick as I can, and happy to try to help you with any questions you have, regarding anything. And I'm not going to sugarcoat anything. If you call and tell me you've got an $800 budget to get into long range shooting, I'm not going to tell you that's going to work for you. It's just not. So I'll be honest with you. It may not be what you want to hear, but it'll be the truth.
Hey, real quick, Paul, on your website, PMAC can you spell that? Is it PMAC or MACK? How does that work?
Yes. PMACprecision.com. Awesome. And I'll have the new website up here in a day or 2 or 3. I've been working on it for a while now. It's just one of those things I have to work on a little bit at a time.
Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned that. I actually have my website being rebuilt right now as well, and that started about, I don't know, a
2
month
weeks
and a half
ago.
ago. No, it wasn't 2 weeks.
It was 3 weeks.
No.
3 weeks. And I'm really just waiting on you to send me the rest of that stuff, man, to get it done.
Yeah, I know. I'm poking fun at Jeremy. Jeremy's actually done a phenomenal job rebuilding my website. But if you go to my website now, it looks like a 14-year-old designed it, which was me. But Jeremy's done a phenomenal job of rebuilding my website, making it look professional and everything. And I'm literally poking fun at Jeremy right now. So
that's on my list of things that get done today. Aaron, where can people follow you if you do the social media thing? If there's some folks that want to reach out to you, where can they get a hold of you?
They can find me on Facebook. I don't post a lot. Just my name, Aaron Miesse, AARONMIESSE.
Awesome.
And you can follow me, and then I'm basically only going to post my shooting stuff on there. So, but I don't really have much of a following. I just shoot, and hopefully, if I inspire someone, then that's kind of
That's awesome.
Inspire somebody to do something while I'm getting to do something I really love and have a passion for. So
awesome. And Melissa, is there somewhere people can go to find out more about you?
Just Melissa Ridings, RIDINGS on Facebook, and then Honey R on Instagram.
Awesome. Well, we definitely appreciate y'all jumping on and spending your time with us. Melissa, Aaron, and Paul, if you guys wouldn't mind hanging out for 2 or 3 more minutes after this, just that way we can do a quick little wrap up with y'all, it'd be greatly appreciated. Everybody else, stay safe and have a great week.